everyone, I hope you're all good and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about my theory of what would happen if Vader returned in episode 9 instead of Emperor Palpatine. Before we jump in, if I can just remind you to hit the subscribe button for regular Star Wars content and remember to click the like button if you enjoyed today's video. Now, Anakin was the chosen one that the prophecy referred to. He was freed from slavery as a young boy on Tatooine. He became a very powerful Jedi, fighting in the Clone Wars and training an apprentice himself in Ahsoka Tano. He was the youngest Jedi ever to be on the Jedi Council, even though he wasn't granted the rank of Master. Anakin always had a dark side presence within him. Now, Anakin's attachment is what ultimately led to his turn to the dark side through the fear of losing Padme, as he'd previously lost his mother. As we all know, he did eventually lose Padme, but not before she gave birth to two twins, Luke and Leia. And this is the reason that Anakin returned to the light side at the end of the original trilogy, to save his son before becoming one with the Force. Now, according to concept artist Ian McCraig, who is working on The Force Awakens, Anakin almost returned in that film. He said, and quote, "When you light a candle, you also cast a shadow," with some concept art. Now, what if Darth Vader returned in episode 9 instead of Palpatine? Now, I don't think he would have been able to return in quite the same way Palpatine did. As far as we know, Vader didn't have a host of clone bodies to transfer into once he was about to die, and he probably didn't even know of this power, as he could have potentially seen it as a way to bring back Padme somehow. Even though she wasn't Force sensitive, he could have saw it as a path that could be explored. But we don't know about that. But we do know that even after Padme's death, he was searching for ways to possibly bring her back, and perhaps during this search he managed to find a way for him to return after his death eventually. In the comic Star Wars Adventures: Shadows of Vader's Castle, Darth Vader's servant Vinay, who still remained loyal to the Dark Lord even after his passing, declared himself as the one true acolyte of the Beyond. Vinay swore to resurrect Vader in the fires of Mustafar. There are a few ways this could have potentially happened. Perhaps with Sith magic a new body for Vader could be created, or perhaps Vinay had managed to clone him, perhaps using any remains he could find after Vader's body was burned at the end of Return of the Jedi. Or there's a good chance actually that Vader's DNA was stored by Palpatine for some reason, perhaps for his high M count, for example. Anakin and Vader were separate entities almost, so perhaps resurrecting Vader leaves Anakin in the netherworld of the Force and bring back a purely evil Vader with no conflict within him, which is something we did get rumblings about, in some of the rumours swirling around at the time the prequels were being created. So, no inner battle with the light side and no paternal or parental instincts. I feel he would still have mourned Padme, because this was a large part of Vader's internal suffering throughout the years. With a fully dark side Vader, 100% flesh and no severe injuries to weaken his Force abilities, he could be insanely powerful. However, as we saw with Palpatine, the clone body wasn't strong enough to harness the immense power of the Force. So Vader, even though he would be immensely powerful, still wouldn't be at the level he would have been as if he didn't lose to Obi-Wan on Mustafar. Although I do believe he would be more powerful than Palpatine when Palpatine returned, as when he returned, basically a fully powered Vader would be much more powerful than a fully powered Palpatine in his prime. I think the First Order, or Kylo Ren in particular, would be much more Team Vader than he was Palpatine, as Kylo's ultimate goal was to overthrow Palpatine and rule with Rey at his side. I really don't think he would have tried this with Vader, as he idolises him so much, often turning to Vader's charred helmet for what seemed like some kind of form of Force counselling for him. I think he would have wanted to rule alongside Vader as grandfather and grandson. And upon the announcement of Vader's return, there would probably still be parts of the First Order that wouldn't really want to be associated with Vader, just as some of them didn't want to join forces with Palpatine. But I think these individuals or small groups would be dealt with in the same way they were in the film, quite swiftly and easily. Vader would most certainly want to rid the galaxy of Rey, that's a given, as she was a Palpatine and extremely strong in the Force, a great threat to Vader and Kylo's plans to rule the galaxy together. fueled by power and greed, of course. However, with the bond of Rey and Kylo, this may cause more internal struggle within Kylo, adding to the pull to the light he was already struggling with, which was only heightened after killing his father, of course. I think Vader would assume the role of master, whilst I believe Kylo would be more than happy to take on the role of apprentice to his grandfather and reinstate the Sith rule of 2, purely down to the amount that he idolises him. Kylo did tell Rey during The Last Jedi to let the past die, but with Vader back I'm sure this would no longer be the case. Now Vader would most likely be training Kylo, whilst passing on all the Sith knowledge he gained over the years, making Kylo even more powerful than he'd ever been before. With Kylo and Vader side by side, I don't think there would be any hope for the galaxy really at this point. No one would become close to be able to compete with Vader and Kylo Ren together. Even Palpatine wouldn't have been as powerful as Vader if he wasn't confined in his armour. So there's no way that Rey would even stand a chance against him on her own, or even with Leia in my opinion, as this Vader has no internal struggle to save his child. Kylo would still have a force bond with Rey as seen in the films, but during these force bonds wouldn't be trying to turn Rey to the dark side, he'd be trying to track her down and eliminate her, as he was about to on the wreckage of the Death Star. But Kylo also has a deep connection with Rey still, something that fueled his idea originally of Rey joining him and then both overthrowing Snoke and in Episode 9 Palpatine together. I think Leia, given that she's Vader's daughter and has obviously heard from Luke just how he redeemed himself at the end of Return of the Jedi, would attempt to seek Vader out herself to try and achieve the same outcome potentially, or more than likely actually. Not knowing that Anakin Skywalker, the good side didn't return, only the dark side of Vader, perhaps she would try and reach out to Kylo or Vader through the Force in order to find out where Vader was, and upon finding him, I think it could go one or two ways, but ultimately ending with the same result. Perhaps Vader would try and turn Leia to the dark side, which she would of course reject, or he might realise that due to her advancing years, Kylo was a better choice to be his apprentice and be at his side. Either way, I believe Vader would kill her, as this Vader is purely dark side and has no internal struggle to do the right thing. Rey and Kylo would both feel Leia's passing through the Force, as they did in Episode 9. This would prompt more anger within Rey, pushing her closer to the dark side herself, whilst pushing Kylo closer to betraying Vader due to the strong paternal connection between him and his mother. After all, he didn't take the shot, which would have surely killed Leia. During The Last Jedi he hesitated, which is more than what we can say he did for his father. Vader would probably tell Kylo afterwards that Leia's death was necessary. It was a necessary loss, or just a necessary death, as she posed a great threat to what they were trying to achieve. She was training the last Jedi in Rey after all, who could go on to train many more Jedi in the future if she wasn't stopped. And also, even though in her advancing years, Leia was still probably strong in the Force herself, as we see her pull herself back in from space and survive being in space after being blown out of the ship in episode 8. Now, this statement from Vader would come across incredibly cold and emotionless, as to him Leia would have just been something standing in his way to power. This internal struggle Kylo was already facing, and the fact that Vader had killed Leia and was also planning to kill Rey, would probably be too much for him. That would probably push him over the line. I think he would truly see that trying to follow in his grandfather's footsteps all along wasn't the right path to take. Anakin came to this realisation, but it was too late for him. It isn't too late for Kylo Ren, and ultimately his mother dying would be the reason he turned back to being Ben Solo once again. I believe Leia is the one person that could bring Ben Solo back, as was the case in the actual movie. Now with Ben Solo back, he would then go to Rey, join up with the Resistance or Rebels, whatever you like to call them, and whilst he would be met with some hostility, he would eventually be accepted as he was Han and Leia's son after all. And I'm pretty sure Rey would vouch for him, as she did to Luke in The Last Jedi, and would quickly realise that Ben Solo has returned and it wasn't some kind of trick or plan. Although I doubt the Resistance would trust him, after all he's done, it's quite understandable why they wouldn't. Now at this point I don't think Rey and Kylo, even together, would be strong enough to take on Vader, but with Kylo passing on what he had learned from Vader and Rey passing on what she had learned from Leia, would give them a chance. They would need to tap into both the light and the dark side of the Force to beat him. Eventually, when it does come to that moment, and when Rey and Kylo are confronting Vader with the energy of all the Jedi who came before behind them, and Vader with all the Sith who came before within him, and to be noted, although extremely powerful, not at his full potential due to the body he's in not being his original one, would eventually fall. As Rey and Kylo together are extremely powerful, they're dyed in the Force, and with both using the light and dark sides of the Force, combined with the training Kylo received from Vader in particular, would prove to be too much for the Dark Lord, thus removing the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Click the like button if you did. Let me know what you guys think would happen in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you.